Time for our panel this Monday afternoon. Grahame Morris here with me in Canberra, Bruce Hawker in the Sky News Centre. Welcome to both of you. Good to see you. I want to start with how this budget debate is going now that the Parliament's back for a sitting fortnight. Grahame, the debate today, very much a feud between different families, those with kids who are school age, those with kids who are at childcare. Take money away from those who've got school age kids, more for those at childcare is what the government wants to do. Labor's released these tables today that NatSem have put together, and it does show some vulnerable families are going to be worse off. How do you think this is going for the government?
Well, look, the politicians have just come back, and you could tell from even the Parliament today that the coalition has its tail up. Now, it didn't matter whether it was the netball courts, the footy field, the front bars, the branch meetings, small business. They're getting a good reaction. Now, is it everybody at this stage? No, it's not. But it's the coalition base has been saying, on you fellas. Small businesses saying, you're on the right track, thank you very much. And those who wanted the government to improve is there. But you know, there's still that big gap in the middle of people who will make up their mind very late. But the reception is pretty good.
And that's playing out in the confidence figures too, isn't it? Consumer confidence figures from a number of institutions are showing.
No doubt about that.
Largely the small business package I assume is giving it a bit of a boost.
Look, on the NatSem figures, an organisation like NatSem are going to be very, very, very careful about their own credibility. You know, I've used organisations like this a lot, and it's all to do with modelling. And that depends what you put in. So you're asking our computer to do something and you're feeding in certain information and out comes a certain thing. Like, for example, the simplest one. I want the computer to prove that an apple is a tomato. Oh, okay, I'll tell the computer it's round, it's red, people eat it, and it's got seeds. Oh, look, it's a tomato. And you know, it just depends on what on earth you feed in. And it does seem to me that in this case, the Labor Party has asked an organisation to do something, and blow me down, out it comes. A narrow little thing.
I don't think the government's disputing these figures, though, by any stretch. I mean,
yeah, but what about the rest of them?
Yeah, well,
where are the winners?
Exactly. Bruce, this is the point. These tables, no doubt, are right. You know, there are going to be families who are worse off. There are also going to be families with kids who are childcare age, toddlers, who are going to be better off. So it is a debate, isn't it, between those with younger kids and those with older kids?
Yeah, to some extent, but there's also bigger debates about healthcare cuts and education and so forth. It's not just about the family benefits package, although that is an important aspect of it because that's where so many of the voters, you know, really going to make up their minds. So, look, it's a much better package than it was last year, but that's like bashing your head against a wall for 12 months and saying when it stops, oh, that feels much better. It doesn't necessarily mean that things have got all that much better. It's just that the immediate pain has gone away. And I think this is the challenge for Labor. It really has to go out there and sell a story about huge inconsistencies in the approach of the Abbott government. 12 months ago, we had a budget emergency. Now, you know, we've got to stimulate the economy and it all seems to be well on the horizon. This is a message that Labor's got to come out and say, look, they're a bunch of flip-floppers. They'll say and do anything to get themselves re-elected, and you know, they're going to, and you, the public, are going to pay for it at the end of the day because we're still going to have serious problems in the next budget and the budget beyond.
But just to drill down though on this particular debate today and the one that's going to play out for some time now over families, Labor is saying it wants to defend these family payments to largely family tax benefit Part B, families who've got one parent staying at home even when their kid is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. Bruce, do you think that's going to be a hard argument to mount, that taxpayers should still help a parent stay at home when the child is, you know, 15 years old?
Well, I think it's a tougher debate, but I don't think it's an impossible one. And I think, you know, more importantly, they just have to be talking about how, you know, this government continues to cut in very important areas which are going to affect families at the lower end of the economic margin and people who are struggling to make ends meet. I think the challenge for Labor is just to have a very consistent message, and you know, Chris Bowen started to demonstrate that last week with his address at the National Press Club, and I think we've just got to keep that going from Labor. They've really got to campaign around the fact that this is a government which is, through a sleight of hand, is giving the impression that things are much better than they are, and now, they really need to make that point, not just now, but you know, between now and the election.
Right. Bruce touched on it, Graham. Paul Kelly wrote about this on the weekend. The Prime Minister's big problem at the moment is the question of, you know, what does he really stand for, given he's gone from one end of the spectrum to the other on paid parental leave. We've seen him change over the years on various other things as well, whether it's climate change or superannuation. Do you see this as an issue for Tony Abbott?
No, not yet. You know, he was a man who stood for, you know, some very strong principles and some very strong policies during the election campaign. He tried it in the last budget, and you know, the Senate wouldn't wear it. Now, you can't do anything from opposition, and the government was heading for opposition. So he put on his common sense hat and said, hey, let's get back into this political game. Now, over the next 18 months or so, the government has industrial relations, it has you know, Northern Australia stuff, it has, you know, competition responses, it has tax, it has federalism. All of this will give the Prime Minister a terrific chance to have a message for the next election. But if the Labor Party wants to play silly buggers, it will also give the Prime Minister a platform to campaign on more money for children. Well, how dumb would Labor be?
Let me move to national security. Today's announcement, Graham, you first on this. Does the counter-terrorism coordinator make sense to you, that this new role?
Yeah, part of it did, but there's still something that's unanswered, and that is, yeah, you know, most Australia, should we have a coordinator? Well, should we? Sure. You know, we've got so many agents involved in this that stuff could slip through and people not talking to each other, so that's sensible. Yeah. The trick, I don't know, is the next thing where people are talking about citizenship. Now, most Australians would say, if these idiots come back to Australia and they're trained by terrorists, we don't want them. Well, that's good. We don't want them. But what if they are Australian citizens? We strip them of citizenship because they took a vow, you know, that they would obey the laws, and they haven't, so get rid of it. But what happens to them then? And I think that is the thing that everyone is grappling with at the moment. If we make these people non-citizens,
who's going to prosecute
what happens to them?
Yeah. Bruce, I imagine Labor doesn't want to have much difference with the government on these national security issues at the moment, but we have heard Bill Shorten talking about rehabilitation as well as a tough line on citizenship. Is this going to be a difficult one for Labor?
Look, I don't think it'll be hugely difficult for Labor, but I do think they need to be careful about the way they approach it. I mean, they are vulnerable if it looks like they're being soft in any way on these people coming back to the country. But I do think it's important to raise these serious debates about, well, what do you do with these people when they come back? Are there some of them who, you know, you can actually use to infiltrate, if you like, these groups and start proselytising in the other way to tell them what a horror it is to be involved in ISIS and everything they're doing? I mean, that could be a very, very powerful message. So it comes down to the way, you know, to whether you just do a blanket ban on these people coming back, or whether you actually say, well, you know, some of them might actually be worthy of bringing back into the country, closely supervised, to make sure that they go out there and tell the story to people who would otherwise be very vulnerable to this message. So, yeah, I think there's a room for a serious debate around the issue. I mean, in the past, you know, Menzies stopped Wilfred Burchett coming back into the country. He was a born and bred Australian by withdrawing his passport. That was in the 1960s. But so there is some precedent for this, but I think on a large scale it would create very serious issues on the international relations level, as other countries who are also afflicted by these problems are asking questions, well, why are you just dumping these people you know, in our backyard when you should be taking some responsibility for them yourself?
Yeah, look, none of this is easy. We'll see where they end up with this by the end of the week. No doubt we'll be talking about this next week as well. Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.